Conservative influence Charlie Kirk was shot dead by a left-wing assassin with a political agenda, and according to various news reports, conservatives are to blame. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. This is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, various papers, I don't know if you saw this, it was mostly on Saturday, tried claiming that the accused killer, Tyler Robinson, was a far-right radical who killed Kirk for not being far enough to the right. That narrative, thank goodness, that whole thing fell apart within 24 hours or so. But the thing is, the press knew it was a lie when they ran with it. Within minutes, at least an hour of the assassination, MSNBC's Matthew Dodd blamed Charlie himself. He said, and this is a quote, "You can't stop with these awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and then not expect awful actions to take place." Dowd didn't bother to quote any of those awful words, but he did get fired, which is some accountability I wasn't expecting. You won't be seeing him on MSNBC anymore, but I think he's still looking for donations on Blue Sky with the rest of the weirdos. This next item's from Stephen Miller, who's a conservative here in Colorado. He said, the most influential conservative influencer was shot and assassinated in broad daylight. The country watched the video of him bleeding violently, and the left and the media have spent the last 4 days telling everyone that the right is more violent. I've never experienced anything like this in my life with the media, and you should never forget it, ever. And, Bill, I was going to ask you a question, but I'm watching your face, so I'm just going to say, go.
There's no connection. The rhetoric is no connection to reality, but I think the left realizes that this is essentially the death knell for what's left of the mainstream media. And I think they also are desperate to shift this narrative because they are aware of the complicity that they have in it. Look, we did an episode just a couple weeks ago where we talked about the Sears campaign, and one of her supposed supporters showed up with a sign that was kind of racist and in bad taste. And the three of us agreed that you can't be held, Sears' opponent can't be held responsible for what one person does. And I think that was a fair analysis on our three parts. But this isn't that. This is the systematic demonization of conservatives as fascists and Nazis. And I don't know how else to put this, but on some level, I think we are partially responsible for the assassination of Charlie Kirk because we took it. We simply took it. They called us Nazis and fascists, and when Kamala Harris was asked point blank, do you believe that Donald Trump is a fascist? She says, yes, I do. I do believe it. We allowed ourselves to be tarred with this because we thought it was the same kind of thing that we would do when we call them, a bunch of commies or whatever. We can disagree with the left and criticize the left without wanting them dead. But what allowed to happen by tolerating this was that this echo chamber was set up to the degree where I'm just now looking at the latest reports where there's a text conversation between Robinson and his roommate. And,
I've got some of that later in the segment.
Right, and the roommate said, "Why did you do it?" And Robinson said, "I'd had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." Speaking about Charlie Kirk. Now that individual clearly has never listened to Charlie Kirk at any length whatsoever. Yeah. This individual has been told that Charlie Kirk is a fascist, the conservatives are fascist, the MAGA movement is fascist, and I've seen a number of conflicts between, not only before and after Charlie Kirk's assassination, where, for example, there was a bicycle race and somebody was saying, get men out of women's sports. And these three progressives were saying, you better get out of here before we hurt you because we kill Nazis here. And you're a Nazi, and we kill Nazis. So the guy basically says, I think they ought to get men out of women's sports. Now, this guy's life was directly threatened, and the money line was, we kill Nazis. And so there you go. Now, I'm going to later do a close look at the examination of the psychology of this. But the bottom line, Steve, is that this label of fascism and Nazism has been spoken by every single senior member of the Democratic Party and amplified and invented and repeated by the mainstream media. As one example, Just as one example, remember during the campaign when Donald Trump did an event at Madison Square Garden, and the first thing we saw in the news was that the Nazis also had held a rally in Madison Square Garden.
yes.
Remember that?
That was just the other day in the 1930s.
That's right. The Nazis also had a rally
80,
here.
90 years ago.
Okay, so that is undeniable. And I think the term is stochastic terrorism, where you are essentially setting up an entire societal argument that a certain philosophy is so far out of bounds that the people who believe in it are not human, and since they're not human, they deserve to die. Now, most people hear that message and they just develop a raging hatred. We saw a bunch of those in the aftermath. But some people hear that and they decide, I've got to do something about this. And so for Charlie Kirk's assassin to say that you can't reason with the kind of hatred that Charlie Kirk has shows you how completely informed by the social narrative this guy was, as opposed to what Charlie Kirk was actually saying. Scott said on our backstage show, I thought it was the most quotable line I've heard about Charlie since the assassination. I really do. Scott said, speaking of Charlie Kirk, Scott said his technique was his message. And his technique was to set up a banner that says, change my mind, not kill all the trans people, change my mind. And that disarming willingness to talk about issues is
He
about
listened. He was respectful.
It's about as far from hate as you can possibly get. If Charlie Kirk was a political firebrand who had rallies instead of discussions and genuinely was calling for things like the elimination of trans people and all the rest of this stuff, still wouldn't justify his murder. But the reason I bring this up is because Charlie Kirk's rhetoric was so far from what this murderer thought of him that the only way that he could have gotten that opinion was if he had been saturated, I mean really saturated, from hearing it from all sides of the left-wing echo chamber.
Yeah. This next item, this is courtesy of Real Clear Investigations. Robert Sperry is just a really good guy, really sharp guy. He noted that, there's a quote, MSNBC host Katie Tur did not disclose during her segment on this that her journalist father is transgender. Bob Tur is now Zoe. And Zoe, by the way, this is me now, he's the same dude who grabbed Ben Shapiro by the neck a couple of weeks ago and threatened to send him home in an ambulance. And Katie pretends, of course, to be an unbiased reporter. Scott, so much of the coverage we've seen from the mainstream media has been insisting that the right turn down the hostile, violent rhetoric. But I maintain that the left, doing what Bill was just describing, there's no big conspiracy to kill people, to assassinate people. There doesn't have to be. The left turns up the rhetoric, they amplify it through the media and through social media, and just wait for a nutcase to decide to grab a rifle. Shouldn't we be telling them to turn it down?
No. And here's why. If you have those views and you are on a TV network that's ostensibly concerned with news, I want to know. I want to hear what you have to say because I want to make it clear to everybody what you actually believe. So I don't think it's a good idea for people to inflame others to violent acts. However, speech squeezes no trigger. The person who squeezes the trigger is the person responsible for the killing, not whatever amount of inflammatory speech he's heard or read elsewhere. And so, yeah, in a civil society, it would be a good idea if you didn't try to encourage people to blur the line between speech and physical action and violence. But if you're on MSNBC and that's what you really believe, I'd really rather hear it. This is the kind of inflammatory thing that Charlie Kirk would say that got him shot. When somebody stepped up to the microphone and espoused a viewpoint, he said, I disagree with that, but I want to hear what you say, and then I'll explain what I believe.
Yeah.
That's got him shot. That is typical of how Charlie Kirk handled things. Now, Is that what people on the left are seeing in their curated algorithmic feeds on social media, where they're being fed more and more of what they want to see? And as a consequence, they're seeing sliced and diced pieces of things and comments out of context. And they, I'm sure, have a completely different view of Charlie Kirk than anybody who's watched him at length or seen what he really does. He doesn't go to college campuses and lead 1930s Madison Square Garden rallies. He goes to college campuses and encourages civic dialogue and treats people with respect and dignity. I am told that after events like this, Charlie Kirk would actually make an effort to go out and shake the hands of people who had stepped up to the microphone. He realizes it's difficult to do that, and he knows that they're under a lot of pressure, and he wants to thank them for their views. This is exactly the kind of person, and let me just say this. As he has fallen, I pray that many will rise in his place, not to cause dissension on college campuses, but to cause civic dialogue.
Yeah, we need more of that. There's one more item that broke just a couple hours before we taped this segment, and Bill, I think, alluded to this earlier. Police released Robinson's text messages, or a section of them, with his transitioning gay furry roommate/lover. And ABC News' Matt Gutman read these and on the air said he's not sure, quote, if we have seen an alleged murder with such specific text messages that were very touching in a way that I think many of us didn't expect, a very intimate portrait into this relationship between the suspect's roommate and the suspect himself, with him repeatedly calling his roommate, who is transitioning, calling him my love, and I want to protect you, my love. Yeah. By murdering a guy who went to college campuses to talk about Jesus. And this is how ABC News' Matt Gutman chooses to focus on this guy. So you know what? I was going to wrap this up by reminding you that the news media is not only worse than you imagine, it's worse than you can imagine. But then I thought I should wrap this up by reminding you that not only do we have the world's worst media, we have the world's worst possible media. And then I couldn't decide which one was better. So you know what? I'll let you make the call. And both is a totally legitimate call. That's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.